Welcome all. I wanted to share with you our collective agreement. Before we begin, inspired by the presenters of Black Reconstructions, Cities and Spatial Justice, a recent event at the Museum of Modern Art, we have prepared a collective agreement for engaging with our invited guests at the symposium. We will recognize others' right to speak from experience and make space for the voice of others. We will practice engaged listening as an act of care. We will not tolerate abusive or hateful speech. Please use the Q&A function to pose questions to the presenter. The session moderator will read the questions to the presenter at the end of the session. Please also note that this session will be recorded and posted on the ICRC website.
Thank you, Jill. And just for people still coming in who didn't hear the initial preamble, while we have approximately 2 to 3 blocked off for this, we may go longer now, may wish to continue going. So please, we hope you're able to stay for as long as the session is able to go. Before I introduce the session, I want to first acknowledge that Western University is located on the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Arawandran, Lenapehoak, and Haudenosaunee peoples, on territory connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. As the Indigenous Education Network cautioned 2 years ago at the AERA conference in Toronto, land acknowledgements must resist becoming performative, static scripts, but should instead be a call to action to reconsider what it means to be in good relations with Indigenous communities, lands, and waterways. As education scholars, educators, researchers, and activists, we want to carefully consider the possibilities for education to redress the many past and present violences enacted in the name of settler colonialism, and recognize that the acknowledgement of lands and waters is only a small part of engaging in just relations with Indigenous communities, lands, and waterways. I wanted to take a moment to welcome you all. Hopefully you were able to join us for our first 2 sessions this morning and this afternoon, but in case you weren't, welcome. Welcome to the Curriculum and Pedagogy for Uncertain Futures Symposium, presented by the Interdisciplinary Center for Research in Curriculum as a Social Practice at the University of Western Ontario. My name is Corey Job. I'm a PhD candidate with the Faculty of Education, and I am a graduate student assistant with the ICRC. The ICRC is a research center within the Faculty of Education at Western, comprised of both faculty and graduate student scholars who work in a collaborative community and university network to advance research in curriculum studies and to inform public policy and pedagogy in the 21st century. We're delighted to be coming together in this virtual space. We're so thrilled that Nyle was able to join us today. More on him in a moment. But this symposium has been curated as a multidisciplinary forum for reimagining the possibilities for curriculum and pedagogy in what is a particularly salient time for this kind of speculative thinking. As I was preparing my introductory thoughts for the symposium, I was reading and thinking alongside cultural critic Olivia Lang, who in the introduction to her recent book of essays, Funny Weather, turns to the powerful speculative world making of art to both contextualize and to look within and beyond the intensity of our collective times. I think this ties in really nicely with what Nyle is going to be speaking about today. And in her introduction, Lang writes, "What I wanted most, apart from a different timeline, was a different kind of time frame in which it might be possible both to feel and to think, to process the intense emotional impact of the news, and to consider how to react, perhaps even to imagine other ways of being." And so it is in the spirit of imagining what other ways of being are possible that we have convened this multidisciplinary lineup of presentations from education scholars, artists, graduate students, and community activists to consider the role of curriculum and pedagogy for uncertain futures. Responding to the times in which we live, a world shaped in part by the ongoing climate and waste crises, anti-Black, anti-Asian, and anti-Indigenous racism, the COVID-19 pandemic, and geopolitical instabilities, just to name a few, we have oriented this symposium around the following provocations that we invite you to think with as you listen to the presentations, whether you're joining us for just today or whether you're coming back tomorrow. First, we ask, what are the possibilities for inviting speculation into curriculum studies? In the name of what are curriculum and pedagogy enacted in response to the conditions of our times? How might curriculum scholars engage with Indigenous and Black feminist studies to contest humanism and coloniality in education? And lastly, in the face of 21st century challenges, how are educators, curriculum theorists, and pedagogues rethinking curriculum and pedagogy? The format for each session will vary. However, each session will include time at the end for questions and answers between audience and presenters, and you're invited to use the Q&A function to share your questions with the moderators, who will then facilitate this portion of the event. We ask that you, again, please keep in mind our collective agreement that Jill read at the beginning when participating in the Q&A. I would also like to recognize the collective work of the Symposium Planning Committee, graduate students, and the director of the center, Tatiana Zakharova, Malvika Agarwal, Jill Dombrowski, Samia Javed, Sarah Hennessy, Courtney Niedig, Lisa Marie Gagliardi, and Veronica Piscini-Ketchupah. And lastly, just before I get out of the way, if you are joining in and sharing the conversation via social media, please feel free to tag any of the Symposium Planning Committee and share your experiences using hashtag #UncertainFutures2021 and hashtag #WorldsToCome2021. We are recording each session, and the videos will be available on our website sometime in the next couple of weeks at www.icrc.uwo.ca, and I will share that via Eventbrite once we have the videos up. Now I'm really thrilled to be turning it over to Sarah Hennessy, who will be introducing the session's presenter.
Thanks, Corey. It is my pleasure to introduce Nyle Miigizi Johnston for the Symposium's Indigenous Storytelling Workshop. Nyle, hiya Nyle. Nyle grew up in Chippewas of Nawash, unceded First Nation, and has apprenticed with storytellers since his youth. Sources of his artistic inspiration include woodland painters, storytellers, and the traditions of his Indigenous culture. Nyle notes, in a time of reconciliation, it's important for all people to know that we exist and have such a strong, beautiful legacy of stories and teachings from the Anishinaabe Nation that are grounded in my experience and identity. As a painter, mural artist, traditional storyteller, and traditional helper, Nyle uses his gift of storytelling to connect his people's stories of love and healing with the broader world, and offer support to a range of community organizations. His work's been exhibited across many of Canada's most important institutions, from the AGO and ROM to Evergreen Brickworks and the Chippewas of Nawash Cultural Center. His work, titled Our First Family, is a collection of images of spiritual beings, plants, and animals based on Anishinaabe teachings. Drawn in a pictographic style, they tell stories of botany and astrology and interconnectedness of all living things. His illustrations and work in learning Ojibwe with numbers and animals is a favorite children's book of mine. Nyle, you are genuinely welcome. Take it away.
Oh, thank you so much for that really kind introduction. And just I want to say miigwech. Thank you to the organizers of this event, and miigwech for I guess allowing me to come in and to share a little bit about I guess my culture and my teachings. I find it to be such a privilege and such an honor, and I'm very humbled. So I just want to say thank you to everybody. I always start my presentations like this. I just want to say thank you to everyone out there. Thank you, and I just want to honor every single one of you, all of your creation stories. I want to honor all of those amazing stories and languages and teachings that you all carry. It's truly humbling to be able to be in this space where we can all share these stories and these different understandings from all over the world. I introduced myself in the language first. The language I'm going to be speaking is Anishinaabe-Moan, and then I'll do my best to translate it over into English. Anana bojo, wish konse Miigizi ni Interdisciplinary. Memegwen se sak ni enda sokanak. Memegwen se sak ni dodem. Ne a shiganigaming ni donjaba minwa tekaranto ne donjaba minwa mishe makanak Anishinaabe aki ne donjaba. I carry two names. The name that that's on my birth certificate is Nyle Johnston, and my spirit name though, and I guess the name that creation knows me by and that my ancestors know me by is Wishkonse Miigizi, which translates loosely into whistling eagle, or Miigizi. I go by Miigizi for short. Miigizi is the white-headed eagle or the bald eagle. So you can call me Nile, you can call me Miigizi. I always say, just don't call me late for dinner. No, I'm joking. And I've had such the, I guess, benefit of growing up with amazing teachers in my life. I grew up on the Chippewas and Nawash First Nations, or Neashignigaming, which is the point of land surrounded by water on 3 sides. And that is, I guess, my First Nations is located probably about 3-hour drive north of Toronto, so not too far, on the Bruce Peninsula, on the Georgian Bay side. And I moved down to Toronto when I was younger. Actually, I moved down because I wasn't doing too well in school on my reserve. And I came down probably when I was about 14 or 15 to kind of to take my schooling a little bit more seriously. And I've kind of been situated in the Toronto area ever since. My clan, so my ancestors, the family that I come from, is the Little People, the Miigizi. And there's stories of the Little People all over the world. And I'll be talking a little bit more about them later on in the presentation. And I guess, like, I also said, sorry, a couple other things I said. I also said I'm from Anishinaabe, or Mishi-Mackinac Anishinaabe. So Mishi-Mackinac is that great turtle, and Anishinaabe, the place of the Anishinaabe, or the land of the Anishinaabe. So I'm from Turtle Island, which we now know as North America. And like the stories and the teachings that I carry were passed to me from my great grandmother. So I want to acknowledge her. That is my great grandmother, Verna Johnston, or Verna Najuan, as well as I used to travel around with another storyteller and author when I was younger on my reserve, and his name was Basil Johnston. So I just want to acknowledge him as well. And I always put out a disclaimer that I don't speak for all Indigenous people. I don't speak for all Ojibwe or Anishinaabe people. I can only speak to the stories and to the teachings as they've been passed to me, as I've come to understand from my teachers, from my region, from my area of the Great Lakes. The Anishinaabe, we're also known as the Ojibwe people, and we're also known as the Chippewa people. The Anishinaabe territory is vast. It encompasses the Great Lakes and even goes out west into the prairies. So I don't claim to speak for the entire nation. I can, like I said, I can only speak for, I guess, for my region and for my community. And I just wanted to knock that idea of pan Indigenous I just wanted to knock that idea out of our heads, because Turtle Island is such a vast territory. And sometimes what people do, and especially when I get asked, is that they group all Indigenous people from across, right from the Atlantic to the Pacific, as one, and thinking that we share languages and that we share cultures and teachings, when in actuality we don't. Look at the size of, I guess, somewhere like continental Europe. Look at all of the many languages and cultures that come from, I guess, that small continent of Europe. And then look at North America and the size of North America. And so the concept that we all share languages, that we all look the same, that we all have the same stories, I think is absolutely absurd. So I just want to knock that out of our heads right now. I've been asked to talk a little bit about, I guess, about my journey as a storyteller, and I guess share a couple of traditional stories. And it's always amazing because I get called, there's a lot of titles I carry in my community. I'm a painter, I'm a mural artist. I get called into the community now to be a storyteller, which I'm still kind of, I guess, still coming to grips with. I don't really consider myself a storyteller, but the community always calls me to come in and share these stories. For some reason, these amazing teachers have been put into my path, and it's such an honor. But I'm also what I consider to be and what I like to call myself is an Ashkabewis or a Shkabewis. An Ashkabewis or Shkabe for short is Anishinaabe Moen for a traditional helper. I've been involved in the ceremony community since I was a young kid, and I've been part of that ceremony community my entire life. And I guess like that's my main role, and like what I like to call myself is a helper. I'm there to help the community when they call upon me to share, I guess, teachings, to share stories, to help with different traditional ceremonies as well. And these stories to me are so important. I guess in a time when I was growing up on my reserve, I struggled quite a bit. There was I guess there was a lot of sadness within me. And I was young, and I couldn't pinpoint where this sadness was coming from, and this feeling of anger. And it was these teachings and these stories that for me really, I always say that they really did save my life. And the path of life can be crazy, but for some reason, at the moment I needed the most, these teachers were put in my path, and really helped, I guess, pull me back from all the distractions of modern day life, and help pull me out of this sadness that I was carrying, that I couldn't quite put a name to. And that's why I share these teachings. That's why I share these stories. That's why that drives my painting, is to keep passing these stories and these teachings to the next generation, so they have a little easier of a time, so that they can grow up being rooted in their teachings, be rooted in their ceremony, in their language, in their culture, just to make it a little bit easier for them. The history of colonization within Canada, it can be quite hurtful. And I guess when I was growing up in school, and one of my teachers as well, Basil, said this as well, learning about Indigenous history within these school systems, I remember Basil said it perfectly. It was like, that's it? That's all there is out there? And that's when I really started looking at my language and really diving into my teachings and to those stories, because these stories, they are our history. They talk of the land. They talk of our origins. They talk of our understanding and our worldview with the environment and just our place within history. At the beginning, I said I wanted to acknowledge everyone's creation stories, the way that I was taught. And like I said, I don't speak for everyone. I can only speak for myself. The way I was taught is there's creation stories all over the world. No matter where you come from, we carry creation stories. I referenced one of the creation stories already when I said Mishi Makanakanishanaa Beaki, or even referencing Turtle Island. Turtle Island, the reason why we call North America Turtle Island comes from a story, comes from a story of creation. And I remember hearing these stories when I was younger, and then I would listen to other, I guess, creation stories from around the world, and I would find commonalities within them. Within that story of the Great Turtle and of Turtle Island, there was a huge flood that encompassed the entire world, and a massive flood. And in this flood, one of our I guess one of our manitos or spirits, their name is Nanabojo or Nanabush. And Nanabush was in that great flood, bobbing in the water. And Nanabush saw this giant log kind of floating by, this huge tree. And then Nanabush or Nanabojo noticed that all of these animals were swimming and climbing onto that tree, and they were resting. And birds were flying from every direction to come and rest on this massive log or tree within this great flood. I remember when I was a kid and I was listening to this, it reminded me of another really popular, I guess, Western popular creation story. And that would be the one of Noah's Ark. Noah had to build this huge wooden boat and get two of each animal in this time of this massive flood. Then I just think of my creation story. I'm just like, wow, there's similarities within that. And our ancestors from all over the world were recognizing these events within history and sharing these stories. And as I've grown up and as I've learned of more creation stories from around the world, I hear that there was a great flood in the Ballad of Gilgamesh. I think there is, I don't want to speak for other communities and other cultures, but I think there was a great flood within the Egyptian creation story as well. And I look at this and I'm just, it fills me with so much hope and joy, I guess, because our ancestors were all connected in some way. We all share this environment and we share these moments within time. And then we share these stories. The creation stories, to me, they're everything. To me, they're everything. I've heard people call them fables and myths and legends. The way that I was taught is there's so much more than that. These creation stories, they're almost like they're living. And they know when they're being told, and they like being told. I remember when I was traveling around with Mr. Johnston, Basil Johnston, when I was younger, and he said something that really shook me to my core, and still it burned its place in my mind. And I think about this all the time. But he was driving where we're going. We used to go to different libraries around the Bruce Peninsula and do storytellings. I think we were coming home from one of those events, driving back to the reserve, back to the Chippewas and Nawash or Neashignigaming. And he looked kind of agitated. And I was just like, what's going on? And he told me, you know what? People, when they talk about the creation stories, they always make it sound like it's something so far back in time. It's like we're disconnecting ourselves from the creation story. When in actuality, the creation story is still unfolding. The creation story is still happening. And we're active participants within these stories. And that really jolted me. It made me kind of think a little bit deeper. What do you mean? These narratives are still unfolding. I'm an active participant within my creation story. These creation stories were passed down from our ancestors. In a couple hundred years from now, I'm going to be one of those ancestors. I will be an ancestor. What kind of story do I want my community to share? I have young children. What story do I want my grandchildren to share? So important to me. These stories are, the more that I hear them, the more I'm so amazed by how, I guess, like, our ancestors were geniuses. The way that they could read the stars, their understanding of the plants, of the animals, and of the environment. It blows my mind. A story that's passed to me. This story was Hazel, and it's called The Gift of the Stars. And I always start off when I'm doing, I know we're in a weird kind of the Zoom verse. Usually when I tell these stories, I move around a lot. I like to take my time. The way I was taught was take your time, move around, know when to make eye contact, know when not to make eye contact. I like to, it becomes almost like a dance or a performance for me. I like to move in, I like to move out. I like to go down close to the earth or come up. So I'm going to be sitting in one spot, but I'll try my best. This story was passed to me by Basil a long time ago. A long, long time ago. I'm not talking about 20 years ago. I'm not talking about 50 years ago. I'm not talking about 100 years ago. A long time ago. Right now, I'm situated in Toronto. If I was to look out my window, I would see buildings. I would see houses. This story took place in a time where I could look out onto Toronto and I would see trees. I would see the forest. I would see valleys. I would see animals. I would see Anishinaabe out performing duties. In this time, there was a village. And in this village, there was a wigwam. A wigwam is a Anishinaabe Moen for like a lodge or a home. And in this wigwam, there was a family. And in this family, there was a Nokomis. Nokomis is Anishinaabe Moen for grandmother. And Nokomis had a grandson. And his name was Southwind. And Southwind was young. He was about 6 years old at this time. And Nokomis and Southwind, after the sun set and the stars would come out, Nokomis and Southwind would walk just outside of the village or of the community. And just outside of the community, there was this beautiful big hill. And Nokomis and Southwind would climb to the top of this hill. And they would gaze up at the night sky. and they would look at the stars. Southwind, 6 years old, is gazing up at those stars. And he has a lot of questions. Nokomis. Nokomis would look down. Yes, my boy. What are those? Nokomis would smile. Those are stars. Nokomis, what are stars? Nokomis would look. You see, each one of those lights, each one of those stars is a little baby. And that baby is waiting to come into this world. Southwind's looking. They're stars. They're babies. Nokomis, I don't understand. Nokomis would just look, smile. It's okay, my boy. Every night, when the weather permitted it, they would go up to the top of that hill and look out at the stars. I don't know if any of you guys have young kids at home, but they're always asking why. Very inquisitive minds. Lots of questions. Nokomis, you said those are babies. Yes, my boy. Okay. He's looking. Then all of a sudden, Southwind noticed something. One of those babies fell from the sky. Southwind got nervous. He got scared. His heart started beating. Nokomis, Grandma, one of those babies, one of those stars fell. They're gonna get hurt. We gotta do something. Nokomis just looks, smiles. You see, my boy, tonight is a very special night. That star came down. That child came down. Someone is going to receive the gift of that baby. A woman will receive the gift of that child. And that child will bring love and joy to that family and to that community. Southwind's looking, kind of confused. Nokomis, am I going to get one of those babies? Kawin, no, my boy. Only the woman will receive that gift of that baby. But you'll receive another gift. And it'll be very special to you. Southwind's looking up, getting kind of excited. I'm going to receive a gift. Okay. So looking, keeps looking. Do you know what Southwind got? You got a neck ache. Your neck can get sore if you look up too long. Take a break. Do some stretches. No, I'm joking. They would go out every night and look at those stars. And Southwind would always see shooting stars coming down. But they were always so far. They were always for other people. started getting discouraged. The seasons come and the seasons go. Winter came in. This winter was tough. If any of you know, winter in Ontario can get pretty harsh. We're really lucky these days. We have things like refrigeration for our food. We have heat and hydro. Back then, if you didn't prepare yourself for the oncoming winter and the other seasons, winter could get very tough. That winter, Nokomis, she got sick. Nokomis got so sick, she couldn't leave her bedding, couldn't come out of the wigwam. Seasons come and seasons go. Southwind was about 7 years old now. The frost, the ice melted. Zigwan, spring came in. And Southwind would go to the top of that hill at night to look at the stars by himself. Nokomis, she was too sick. She couldn't come. Southwind was looking up, looking at those stars. Then he decided he was going to go back home to his wigwam. He was walking down that hill that night. We don't know why. Something told him just to look back. So he did. And he noticed something. This star fell just on the other side of that hill. Southwind's getting excited. His heart's beating, goes running up that hill. And he looks down. And all he sees is darkness. Where is it? I know it fell here. Oh, I know it fell here somewhere. So he walks down that hill. At the bottom of that hill, there was this big pond. He stands at the edge of that pond and he's looking. I don't see anything. I know it landed here. Where is it? Where is it? All you can see are these little white flowers bobbing at the top of that water. I know it landed here somewhere. I don't see it. He goes to turn around again to walk back up that hill. And as soon as he starts walking, he hears this voice calling out in the night from that pond. What are you doing? Take me. I'm your gift. I'm your medicine. He's startled. What the heck? And he looks. Sure enough, at the center of that pond, one of those flowers was calling to him. I'm your gift. I'm your medicine. Little nervous, Southwind walks into that pond. He's standing there, kind of looking at that flower in the eye. He goes in to pluck that flower. And as soon as he goes to touch it, the flower cries out, "Yo, what are you doing? Kawin, no. You take all of me. All of me." A little startled, Southwind starts feeling underneath the water. And there's this long stalk. And that stalk goes all the way to the bottom of the pond. It's not that deep of a pond. So he takes a breath and he dives under and he starts feeling the roots in the mud at the bottom of that pond. Took him 4 tries. He had to come up 4 times for breath. But finally, he digs out that root and he comes out of that water holding this flower and this stalk and this root. And Southwind's confused. This is my gift. I don't even know what this is. Just looking at it. He gets an idea. You know what? My nos. Nos is Anishinaabe Moen for father. My father, he fishes a lot. He traps a lot and hunts. He spends a lot of time in the bush. The bush is a word that we use up on my reserve, and I notice in more northern Ontario, the bush means like the forest. Okay, little side note. He spends a lot of time in the bush. He knows the plants. He might know what to do with this. So Southwind comes walking into his wigwam and hands his father this plant. Sure enough, his father knows what to do. He chops up that flower and makes a tea. And he starts giving this tea to Nokomis, to grandma, who was sick. She starts drinking that tea. She drinks that tea for 4 days and 4 nights. And on that 5th night, Nokomis and Southwind were walking to the top of that hill to look at the stars. Nokomis. Yes, my boy. You know, when you were sick there, you know I was still coming out to look at the stars. Nokomis just smiles. It's good, my boy. Nokomis, you know, on one of those nights, I got my gift. It's good, my boy. Nokomis, I don't think that gift was for me. I think that gift was for you. Nokomis just smiles. As it was told to them, as it was told to me. Miigwech. That is the gift of the stars. I was always told that we're all born, everybody, regardless of who you are, we're all born with a very special gift. We all come into this world with a very beautiful, special gift. And when we receive this gift, usually this happens while the way that I was taught, it happens around when we're teenagers, young adults. We come to the realization of this gift. But when we find that gift again, we grab it, we take it, we nourish it, we love it, we practice it, but then ultimately, we have to share our gift. We have to share our gift with their family, with their friends, and with their community. I was always told from my grandma and from Basil and from all those teachers in my life, the ceremony teachers, you don't hoard your gift. Don't hoard your gift. Share it. Share that gift with your community. Share that gift with the people. It's so important. And I find that especially within my time living in the city, I find a lot of us like to hoard our gifts. We don't like to share it. We like to be greedy and to stash it away. And to me, I can see the effects of that breakdown of that collective learning and sharing, that greediness, that ego that comes into it. Does anybody, I'm going to ask a question. Usually there's a room full of people so I can go and ask questions. Does anybody know what that flower was? I'll give it a second. Let's think of a beautiful white flower that bobs on the water. Does anybody know what that is?
Is it a water lily?
Water lily. A water lily. White pond water lily. I know on other parts of the world, they might call it the lotus flower. Around the Great Lakes, we call it the white pond water lily. And if you ever look at that, flower, it looks like a star. And if you ever, actually, I'm gonna challenge everybody this summer, go out, find a pond, and find those water lilies. Look at them at nighttime, on a clear night, when you can see the stars. It's easy to lose yourself where the sky and where the land are. It's like you're floating in the sea of stars. It's beautiful. And modern, I just read a couple of years ago that they were pumping a lot of money into the research of the water lily root. And they're finding out some amazing things. I guess medicinal effects of that water lily root. In our language, we call it a kandamo, or a kandamo jibik, or a nangnomo jibik, which is like star root. What they're finding is that it has anti-tumor properties. It's antiviral. And it actually helps with women with osteoporosis. And I read these articles and I learn about this. And I'm just like, yeah, I know. My grandma taught me that. Oh yeah, I know. Basil taught me that. It's amazing how our stories go back and how we knew these amazing medicinal properties that these plants have. I just kind of smile. I'm like, yeah, our ancestors have known that for a long time. It's like modern science, or Western science. It's just catching up to what these communities all over the world have known for so long. It really, really gives me hope. It inspires me to keep pushing forward and to keep teaching these stories and these words and the language and the traditions and the teachings to the children. Because like I mentioned before, that next generation, they're the next to be those storytellers, to be those teachers. So I say how important to grab our gift, to really hear it. But you got to remember that gift will only meet you halfway. You got to put in the work too. It's the way I was taught. You got to put in the work. You got to practice it. When I say gift, sometimes people, the way I come to think of it is like a talent. You got to put in the work. You got to nurture it. You got to love it. But then you got to share it. Share it with your community. Don't hoard it. Don't be greedy. Everyone in the community has a very special gift. And when we come together and we share those, we learn from one another, we thrive. Remember, my grandma would talk about that too. Basil would tell me this. These stories aren't yours. They're not yours. Don't think of it that way. You don't own them. The way that I think about it, I'm just holding it, trying my best to protect it so I can share it with the next generation. When we look into that one story, the gift of the stars, just within that one story alone, and that I've heard this story in different regions of the Great Lakes, and it might change a little bit, and that's okay, because it's from those differences that I actually find a deeper understanding of the way that of my teachings. I take the ego out of it. It's like, that's not the way I heard it. That's not right. No, I listen to it with an open mind, with a good mind. I listen to it with a good heart. And I come to a better understanding of my own teachings by learning, by hearing how other Anishinaabe communities might tell it. And that's about the whole world. I respect everyone's creation stories. I am amazed by all of everyone's creation stories. Because when I learn more about those creation stories, I learn more about my own. And it takes that you're right, I'm wrong out of it. We have a word in the Anishinaabe language for first family. Is any show of hands? See everybody out there. Show of hands. Does anybody know what the first family is? And then a lot of people will raise their hand. Oh, that's the Biden administration right now. Used to be the Trump administration. I'm like, Colleen, no, not that first family. Not the president of the United States of America. The first family to me is creation. In Anishinaabe Moin, we say Dia Makanak. The first family, creation. The rock, the water, the insects, the animals, the birds. That's my first family. The trees, plants. That's my first family. Everybody that I can see on my side panel of the Zoom call, that's my first family. I come from a nation, we call it the two-legged nation. I walk upright on my legs. I have really kind of bald, I don't know, body. Have you ever looked at other animals? They got a lot of fur. We must look weird to them. They must look at us and be like, wow, look at those people fumbling around the bush. No hair to keep them warm. You're part of my first family. We have so many commonalities. We do. I'm just looking at my side panel here. It's like, oh, okay, sorry, Sarah, I'm gonna pick on you. You got 2 eyes. Holy, I got 2 eyes. Your ears are right on the side of your head. 2 of them too? Okay, I got those too. All right, how many fingers you got? 1, 2, 10, 10. Holy, I got 10 fingers. We are so much alike. I consider you my family. I find in this, especially within Toronto, or in this world, we like to focus on our differences. We like to emphasize those differences. When I look for the commonalities, it's like, wow, we look a lot alike. Wow, we're like family. That first family, creation, will always be there to take care of us. We're a part of that family. When I talk about the stars, when I talk about the planets, that's my first family as well. You are within the word Anishinaabe, that sacred being that descended from the sky. The cosmos, that's my first family. It's really crazy too, because like the more, I don't know, science and quantum mechanics and all these schools of learning, they really, for me, they just keep justifying what my ancestors have known since the creation of time. In our blood, there's these heavy minerals that can only be formed within a supernova, and then blown out into the universe. We're made up of that. It's so beautiful. I'm so connected to the water. Think of how much water we have in our bodies. It's amazing. These are some of the things that I paint. The way I was told, the way I was taught. We have trees within our body. Look at our lungs. They look like the balsam poplar. Look at our brain stem. Looks like Nokimiskijikatik, grandmother cedar tree, the white cedar. It's beautiful. The way that the pattern of self-repetition, the way that our veins break apart, looks like river systems. It's incredible. And for me, it inspires me. And it's what got me through some of that deep sadness that I carried growing up. And it's still helping me to this day. Within that one story, there's teachings of us coming from the stars, where we come from. Within that one story, there's the teaching that everybody is born with a gift. Within that one story, there's a teaching of medicine, of a plant, of botany. Within that one story, there's teachings of weather and the seasons and how they shift. Within that one story, there's teachings of, I guess, the Anishinaabe methodology of learning. That little boy spending time with that grandmother and learning from her. But also you see that grandmother allowed that space for that child just to wonder, didn't give all the answers. Let that child look up at the stars and let that imagination go and get lost in the cosmos and come to their own understandings. It was guided, but it wasn't shoveled. It wasn't funneled, this funneled education. They were allowed to explore. They were allowed to take their time. Southwind grew up a little bit within that story. Within that one story, there's teachings of botany, of medicine, of astrology, cosmology, so much. That's just one story. I love that story, and with new groups, I always lead with that story. Basil taught me that. It's like anytime you go into a new group or people that might be hearing Anishinaabe stories for the first time, start with that story. And even the way I ended that story, it's important. Excuse me, I just burped. Sorry. It's so important the way I ended it. As it was told to me, as it was told to them. I talk of my teachers. I guess it's like the equivalent of referencing. I talk about my teachers. Who did I receive that story from? It's important. It's not my story. I'm carrying it for a little bit of time, just a little bit of time. Because one day my spirit will return to Skyworld. My body will return to creation. Just a little bit of time. Think of the lifespan of a rock, asin. Think of the lifespan of me, of a human being. Short time. So I guess I got some work to do. That's okay. These stories were so important to me. I'm just speaking for myself because it allowed me to look up into the sky, especially growing up on the reserve, and dream and hope for better things, to project a future for myself, to question things, to let go of some of that sadness that I might have been carrying, that I couldn't just put words to. When I do a lot of work with many communities all across Canada now, such a privilege. But when I do work with Indigenous youth, it's so important to let them look up at the sky and hope and to dream of good things, to dream of a good life. Especially with youth, I always hear that sometimes they don't have a gift. I don't have any talent. I'm not good at anything. I always say, just wait. Just wait. You'll receive your gift. Everybody's got a gift. I love that of our teachings. Everybody, every single person carries a very special gift. I love that. My gift, for some reason, I don't know why, I'm able to hear these stories, then I can recount them, I can paint them, I can draw them. But my duty is to share that, to share it with everyone here. That's like my life's work. And I'm gonna keep learning. I don't like to say I'm a teacher. I'm a student. I'm gonna keep learning. I'm a helper. Shkabe, I'm gonna keep learning. I'm gonna keep learning until the time my body's done here and I go back into Star World. I'm gonna keep learning. And when I'm wrong, admit that, show some of that humility, and keep pushing forward in a good way. The way I was taught with these stories is we're never supposed to change them. We're never to change them. A lot of people do that. We'll do that with our ego. We put our ego into it. We always taught we have a brain, we have a mind, our ego, but we also have a spirit, a heart. And I try to find the balance within those two. I don't let my ego take over that story. I share that story from my heart. I share that story with the teaching of the turtle, truth. I don't try to change it. That's the way I was taught. And I love that ongoing narrative of that creation story and how we're all active participants within our creation stories. That puts a responsibility and a duty on me. I'm just speaking personally. What kind of story do I want my great-great-grandchildren to tell? It's important for me. I know this has been a strange year plus with the pandemic. It's been a tough year. But I've heard stories of this great sickness. These are in our stories. These great sicknesses that traveled the world. They usually come every 100 years or so. Thinking back, one of the last major pandemics of the world, and it was almost 100 years ago. So for me, it gives me hope. And what do you mean now this pandemic gives you hope? It just shows how connected to these cycles and to the earth we really are. Our ego puts us like, no, we're the dominant. No, we create the environment around us and da, da, da. It's like moments like these in time just show how beautifully connected to the cycle of creation we really are. We have a word for the mother of creation, non-kumikasinikwe, under the earth rock woman. Other people I've heard call Mother Earth. That mother, the mother of creation, works tirelessly every single day, works tirelessly to provide to her children. Every single day. Think of it. What a gift. Everybody just you don't even know you're doing it. Take a breath. Creation is working tirelessly to provide that gift of oxygen, of air, that water that we drink. We always say the mother provides. She never asks for anything in return. To me, that's a teaching of unconditional love. And that's what I love to put forward. My responsibility, not only to my community, but also to the environment. When we look at the environment, even the way I was talking about it, the first family, it's my family member. So it's my obligation to take care of that family member, because they will take care of us. Hold up. I got to do a time check on myself. Like I said, I'm very long-winded.
I think, Nyle, I speak for most of us when I say that I sort of settled in and relaxed into listening to your voice and following your lead. And one of the great joys of that is actually I stopped thinking about the time and listened carefully to how and the depth of what you were saying. And that if, as you say, that this is one of your gifts, then the most important thing any of us can do is to receive that gift and listen with all that we can bring to how you tell stories. So I think, it's really hard in this world to get rid of time. And it was really nice for a little while there to fully dismiss time. And so for that, I definitely want to thank you. We have a couple of questions.
I was amazing though. I just glanced and it's like 12 after 2. Whoops, sorry guys.
I don't think there's any need for apology.
One more note. I just love to speak about that how universal these stories are. I was talking about the little people, the Miigizi suck. That's my clan. Do you know that there's stories of these little people that exist all over the world? All over the world. I've heard in Ireland, they have these stories of these different races of these little beings. One of the more popular ones being the leprechaun. Stories of sprites and fairies. I've been up into the Himalayas in northern India, and the old people would talk of these race of these little beings that live in those mountains. Down into the jungles of South America, there's races of these little beings. We have stories. There's stories of the little people all across Turtle Island. It's amazing that our ancestors have been able to look at creation and see these beautiful, wonderful spirits and then pass down those teachings through stories. The Anishinaabe were the people of the Thunderbird. B'nai Siyak. Yeah, B'nai Siyak, the Thunderbird. I have Thunderbirds all over me. Those Thunderbirds, I always think there's stories of Thunderbirds all over the world. They might just be called something different. This is just my opinion. These are the thoughts of Nyle, Miigizi. Those Thunderbirds, the way I was taught in our stories, they bring that rain, but they also stoke fires of revitalization with that lightning. They'll set the prairies on fire. If there is a piece of land that has just been, there's no more nutrients, the mother of creation just needs to call to the Thunderbirds, and those Thunderbirds will come and stoke those fires and bring that new growth within that ash. Is there any other stories from around the world where you know of this big winged creature that rises from fire and from ash? The phoenix? Stories of these huge winged creatures that breathe fire. I've heard stories of dragons. It's just amazing to me when I start looking at all of these teachings from all over the world. And it really inspires me and just shows how connected we are as family. It's a beautiful thing. That was the last thing I wanted to say.
Well, then I'm going to throw you a question. So one of them, going back to the water lily and the properties of the water lily. And there's a question about where you see Western medicine and looking into Indigenous knowledges as gift sharing, or do you see it as extractive, or where's your thinking on that?
My thinking on that, it all depends on the individual, because that individual carries their own spirit and their own mind. And if that mind's carrying an ego and they are coming to be extractive, I can usually pick up on that. If they're coming with a good mind and a good heart because they genuinely want to connect with that medicine, and they're going to share it in a good way and not be exploitative, and they don't come to me being extractive, then sure. And I'm only speaking to myself I'm only speaking for myself, because with the history, you know what, sometimes we do need to protect it. But I always say, what's the intention? What's really going on here? What's the intention? Are they coming to me to be extractive, or are they coming with a beautiful heart and an open mind to learn in a good way?
So thank you. That was, I think intentionality and how you come to something is so important. A number of us on the panel were unsure during your storytelling about when you said that you couldn't see any faces and you couldn't interact with us, and we didn't turn our screens on. But I wondered if it's prompted some of us to ask you some questions about embodiment and storytelling. And so even though you were seated for this whole session, you actually were very physical and you did move. And I'm just wondering what role that plays in your storytelling.
To me, it's really important. And the way that I was taught, I'm just going by what my teachers taught me as well. It's like, I think it's so important. It's a way to engage and captivate those minds and those hearts and really pull people into that story and to make it more alive. I found I had trouble in school. I had trouble sitting in one spot too long. I just did. And I would always be drawing as well. That's one way that I guess I would intake the information and kind of interpret it. I would always be sketching, I'd always be drawing. So to me, it's really important to be able to move around a little bit, to make eye contact, because it brings it to life. And it's just one of those ways to hook somebody in. Even if they don't know that you're doing it, you're hooking them in, you're bringing them in. But also, I've gone to storytellings where it's okay to fall asleep. Some of these storytellings would go for a long time. And if you wanted to go to sleep, you could go to sleep and there was no disrespect. I remember falling asleep a couple times and I would dream of it. So I was still listening in some way. But that's a privilege too. I'm able to move around. I have to recognize that as well.
A number of people are posting about how compelling the experience of you storytelling has been. So beyond just the content, but the experience of being with you and your generosity and connection with your story, and that this idea of receiving a story, the gift that you don't just keep it, you share it. So one of the participants has written a beautiful piece about how their grandmother told me stories of what are called duende, who lived around us and would show themselves only to some people. And listening to you, Nyle, made this person remember their grandmother. And so for that, they are saying thank you. And I just wanted to share that this is meaningful to people in a personal way, and also for a lot of us in education, rethinking that generosity and embodiment of stories. And I think, quite often at the beginning, before we started today, you asked the intentionality of this session and connecting it to curriculum. And I wonder if you have any additional thoughts on connections with curriculum.
I got lots of thoughts, but also we're in this time and place where we have these knowledge keepers out there. We have those storytellers out there. So like, try to actively engage the community of the territory that you're sitting on to come and share that as well. But also, if there's nobody else there, then I wouldn't say go and tell the story, but you can share elements of that story. Because these stories were almost lost. They were almost gone. And I'm what's considered a younger storyteller, but there's a lot of people my age and a lot of youth that aren't hearing these stories. And it's so important, I find. These stories, I don't know, a lot of people don't, I guess the history of Canada and colonization, some of these stories you weren't allowed, it was illegal to tell these stories 30, 40 years ago. So the fact that I'm able to sit here and share this is such an honor. And I always say, whatever, for me, it becomes, even within that one story, when I tell it, I think about the land. I put myself there. It becomes, I guess, a way of experiential learning and letting the land be that teacher as well. To me, that's very important. Letting the first family be that teacher. Hope that kind of answered your question.
Absolutely. So there's another question. You noted that the next generation will be the next storytellers and will carry these stories. Do you have any thoughts on what we need to consider in education to support the next generation?
It's kind of like what Nokomis did in that story. We're there as teachers and to guide and to be helpers and to nurture and foster that want to, I guess, for education. But what's so important with it is that Nokomis allowed that space for that child to wonder and to kind of figure it out on their own as well. It was guided, but it wasn't, this is what it is. This is the only thing it is. And they provided a safe space for that to happen. And that's what I would like to see more within those classrooms, are a safer space than what I grew up with to explore Indigenous culture, identity, language. Because it was, I'm not that old. I guess I'm getting old. Winters keep coming and going, about 35 now. And then it was a very different classroom when I was in high school. When I first came off the reserve, I moved into Toronto. I was the only Indigenous kid in my class, in my high school. And it was tough. So for me, I think it's really important to bring in those teachers and those community members so they can see that. And again, be given that sense of pride and hope. Very different story when I was growing up. And a lot of people, I actually attended the St. Mary's Day School, Indian Day School, up until it shut down in grade 6. So it's so important to create that environment where these, I guess, different methodologies of these different ways of learning are respected and valued. Yeah.
I wonder, I know you work in not just storytelling and that you work with youth, but that you also work with music and with art. And I wonder how these creative expressions, these creative ways inform the ways in which you work with young people.
Yeah, that's because for me, it's, I don't know, I don't like to say it like this, but I can get them at different levels. If this is not working, then I can shift here. If that's not working, then I can shift here. It's almost like a shapeshifter. It's like, wait, okay, that's not working. Let's shift it. Let's work on the fly. How can I captivate or at least pull in these young minds and get them out of their ego and open up their hearts? to the teachings and what they're learning. It's great to process things through our mind, but we also have to process it through our heart, our spirit, and our ego, and come to an understanding with those two. So it's just, even, I do a lot of pictography. So even my tattoos, storytellings, so I can get youth that way as well. Not get them, but even the art that's on my body. Somebody, my young community member, or a young student might have questions about that. And I can pull them in, I can start sharing the stories.
That's next level embodiment.
That is what works for me. What works for you is what works for you.
Well, Nyle, I hesitate to even ask another question, because I think you've really taken us all on a journey, and I thank you for allowing us to come with you on this journey and sharing what is clearly one of your gifts, and enacting what obviously your leaders and elders wanted you to do, which was to share that. And so on behalf of all of us who are in attendance, I want to say thank you. A spiritual thank you, with all my sincerity. And I also want to take a moment to remind everybody, including you, Nyle, to join us for the second day of the symposium tomorrow. So we will be back at 10 a.m. and we have 4 different presentations tomorrow. Ainara Alain starts us off at 10 a.m. and then Ana Binta Diallo at noon. And then at 2 o'clock, we have Vanessa de Oliveira Andriotti. And then at 4 o'clock, Tuani Dusher. And I feel like you are sending us for the rest of our day, thinking differently and feeling differently. And so for that, I thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. Like I always said, I'm very honored to be able to sit here and just share a little bit of what I learned, what grandma taught me. And it's a beautiful thing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nyle.
Miigwech.